Good morning. This is Bevan Gibson. We want to welcome you to the Transitions Academy webinar, Experienced ICAPS Programs Answer Your Questions, and presented to you in part in joint effort between the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support and the Southern Illinois Professional Development Center. Joining me today are Sarah Goldammer and Amy Julian. Welcome to our panelists. I want to thank our skilled panelists for sharing their knowledge and experiences today. Peggy Heinrich from Elgin Community College, Laura Williams from Danville Area Community College, Andrea Fiebig from William Rainey Harper College, and Devin Chambers from William Rainey Harper College, Josh Benezzi from the Illinois Community College Board, and Ben McDaniel from the Illinois Community College Board. All participants will be muted during this broadcast for right now. We will facilitate using the questions that you submitted, and if you have any additional questions, please raise your hand or post the questions in the chat box, and Amy will unmute you. Participation is strongly encouraged. Let's begin. ICAPS programs participating today are Triton College, Morton College, and John A. Logan College. Thank you all for coming. Okay, I want to start with our panelists, and I will call you by name so that Amy knows who to unmute. I want you to provide an overview of the integrated program that you have and the relationships that have been established to make this a successful program. Peggy, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, we started with AO with a welding pathway, a 15 credit hour welding pathway, and we have since added computer numerical control operator, CNC, which is 20 credit hours, dental office aid, which is 15 credit hours, and heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration, or HVAC, which is 19.5 credit hours, all one-year programs. And we've had up until now a full-time career navigator, but as of the end of December, that will be eliminated and eventually replaced with a part-time career navigator position when our funding is restored. But we are continuing to have AO rolling. We have an alternative plan. Your question about the relationships, I would say the most critical relationships are internal with faculty and those within the college that are necessary to really embrace and make this a success. But then also obviously employers for things like tours and interviews and feedback and curriculum development and such.
Okay. Laura?
At DACC, we have an automotive 12 credit hour accelerating opportunities ICAPS program, and we also have a CNA, advanced CNA program that's 13 credit hours. And what happens is basically during the morning hours, the student is in the GED part, and mid-afternoon they do some support-based class, and then in the afternoon they're in the vocational class. The program, the CNA program can be completed, both of the programs, one program's a 1 semester, one program's a 2 semester, the CNA is a 1 semester, but we found that when we added the medical terminology and did a little bit more, that we probably could spread that over 2 semesters. So with both programs, I would suggest that it is a 2-semester program. And they've both worked very well, but I agree with what Peggy was saying. You really need to have every stakeholder that you can think of at the table when you start planning your program, and then that will help lead to success later.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, do you and Devin have anything?
Yes, our program it's our first year, so we're actually only halfway through. Our first certificate has been a basic HVAC certificate, 16 credit hours. We're given our nearness to O'Hare Airport, we're looking next year at a logistics supply chain management certificate, but we haven't started that yet. So we're only halfway through our credit hour HVAC program. The relationships here at Harper have been, what have been key has been making the relationships with the faculty chairs of the departments. They're the ones that really make the decisions and have the power, I guess I would say, to convince the dean to do these partnerships with us.
Okay, thank you. going to go on to the next question. Please provide an overview of the integrated program. Oh, no, that's the one we just did. Please share some team teaching lessons learned. How did the relationship begin? How has it evolved? What has worked well? What were, if any, pitfalls that you had to be avoided? Laura, we'll start with you this time.
Okay. The relationship, again, should start with all of the stakeholders. And, again, we try to have a meeting at least every other month with all the stakeholders. That's starting with the vice president of the college, the dean of the vocational areas, which I'm the dean of the CNA area, and then the dean of the technology area. We've also had our financial aid representative there. We had people from, I'm trying to think what their name would have been last, WIA, and they're now WIOA. One of those representatives were at the table, and you can see where that's going to be very beneficial as we move into where we're at now. We also had possible teachers from all the areas, including the support-based teacher coming from the adult ed side of the house, and then the possible teachers from the CNA and the automotive side of the house. Everyone kind of knew what to expect up front because we tried to pre-plan and have those meetings where we were trying to hash out some of the things that we thought would be problematic or just that we were unsure of, because the vocational teachers really were unsure of what to expect. And I think the adult ed, the same thing, because the person that was helping with the support base, he obviously wasn't a CNA person, so there was a lot of learning to go on. So having those meetings up front give everyone the opportunity to do some pre-planning, to ask questions, and to decide how they were going to approach their individual piece of it. What's worked well was, again, that pre-planning, clear-cut expectations, and then, of course, your support teacher needs to have some idea of what's going to happen in those vocational classes. So as much information as you can give them ahead of time. And when we started, we didn't have time to have the support-based teacher go through the classes, the voc classes. So he was actually in there learning as the students were learning. If it's possible, if you knew ahead of time, if the teacher could take some of those classes or could get the books ahead of time, that way they can look and kind of know what to expect. Pitfalls to be avoided. If a teacher doesn't want to be involved, don't try to force it. I think that we all, in theory, we all understand that's not going to work, and in practicality, it's not going to work either. We had one of our instructors with the auto program who had very preconceived, nonsensical thoughts about what an AO or what an adult ed student would be like, and he wasn't the right personality to be in the classroom with our students. So we saw that really quickly, and he wasn't involved, and again, that was best for our students and best for him, because that way everyone walked away happy.
Okay, Andrea, would you like to chime in here?
Sure. The relationship that we were kind of building off a previous integrated instructional relationship that we had with a kind of learning community model just between a couple of courses in HVAC and adult ed support. So the difference is we built out, these relationships had already been established without the model of IBEST, ICAPS to follow. So they had been just doing it. So we decided to build off a past relationship. It has now evolved as we went through the design year. All faculty went to the training related to the ICAPS model, and it has now evolved and has taken, because it was almost because we were building off a past very organic relationship, being able to do kind of what they wanted. It's taken a little bit more of administrative intervention at times to even remind all involved, well, now we have this accountability attached to it. We also have the transitions coordinator that can provide support to the non-learning needs of the student. So it was kind of, I would actually say that would be a pitfall to go from something that already had been established. If I looked back, I would probably establish a brand new partnership so we could come all in it with the kind of the same ideas. So it's taken a little bit, but it has been the second year now after the design year of pretty much faculty to faculty working together. They do meet together. This first semester have been courses that the adult ed faculty have already audited. This second semester we're going to be facing what Laura just described as the teachers sort of learning as they go, the adult ed teachers being in the classroom at the same time. You know, we're always balancing, I think all of our programs are always balancing the fact that the CTE instructor has the expertise of the content area, the expertise of the tools, expertise of the space that we're even working into, and we always are stepping back and kind of, we're respecting them, we're letting them take the lead, but at the same time looking for that respect to be built on their part for the adult ed instructors, and the way that they can bring in some real good teaching techniques to be able to have the information passed on to the students, so eventually they'll be passing their certification exams and fixing what they need to be fixing in people's homes. So it's still, I would say here at Harper, it's still in process and it's still evolving. And then I think we're going to talk a little bit later too about how we learn what kind of support is needed for each of the CTE courses and how that goes into scheduling maybe a little different each time. So that's basically where we are.
Thank you. I think the important piece there is that you stated that it is a continually evolving process, and I think that everyone needs to keep that in mind as we move forward with this, that it is constantly evolving. So thank you for sharing that. Peggy, would you like to respond to this, please?
Sure. Well, so in the beginning when we first started out, I think just because of the culture here at ECC, we kind of decided that instead of approaching it where we marketed this as team teaching, we decided to sort of sneak in a team teaching model by calling it course auditing on the part of the adult ed faculty member. And we were always really transparent about that with ICCB, which really let us move into some pathway areas where I think there would have been resistance otherwise. So we always had the 50% overlap, but really that was comprised of the adult ed faculty member being in the classroom with the students, learning, but also seeing, you know, where they were getting hung up or tripped up and confused, and then teaching the 3 credit hour support class where they helped, you know, cover or remediate or in many cases reteach material that was confusing to students. That has been extremely successful for us, but I will say that over time that has also evolved. So the example I'll give is in welding, where that's our oldest pathway that started in the beginning. And you know, over the course of time, it's evolved to where, I'll give an example. The support course, sometimes students lose a little bit of motivation to attend if they don't really feel like they're doing poorly in their content classes, and so getting that attendance there is often an issue. And so when the welding instructor, who had developed a close relationship by this time with the faculty in welding, expressed that to them, they worked with her to develop math assignments that they assigned in the content classes that then the students needed to complete for the content classes but needed help within the support class to do so. And then those math skills are necessary enough that they've now infused those into the welding curriculum even outside of ICAPS. So it's kind of had a lasting impact. So I guess what I'm saying is you can start at one place and end at another. But a couple of other things that have worked really well for us. We always, with each pathway, have given a stipend to faculty who do it the first time on the adult ed side to develop a lesson binder, sort of a big fat binder that has copies of all of the things they develop, you know, the worksheets, the simplified vocabulary sheets, math worksheets, everything tied to the course content so that they can use it again in the future, but other teachers who might move in to AO also have a resource available. So that's been something. And then other things that worked well are long-term pairings of faculty. So, you know, we ask the adult ed faculty to commit for a year when we hire them into AO, because it's important that the students have the same teacher for 2 semesters. But also, there's been a couple of areas where unavoidably we've had a lot of turnover, like HVAC, and that's very, very disruptive and very difficult to build that relationship with that area when you keep flipping your teacher on them. So in the areas where we've been able to hold on to the same adult ed teacher over time, it's been most successful. And then lastly, in terms of pitfalls, I would say one is to be careful about stepping on the toes of CTE faculty right away. We had our navigator out there with employers and making contacts, and there was some resistance to that, and some of it was legitimate, because if our student was if our navigator oversold a student's abilities and got them hired, and that student really wasn't there, it could damage the relationship and credibility for our area. So we've had to kind of negotiate where to let them take the lead in talking to employers and where to have our career navigator do that. And then lastly, important to find the right fit for the adult ed teacher. And the example I'd give here is in dental office aid, where it's really a pretty intense curriculum. It's kind of challenging, and we've had 2 instructors in that pathway that have been just overwhelmed and feel like they don't get it enough, even after sitting in, to really be an adequate support to the students. So what we've learned there is we really need to do 100% overlap time the first time a teacher does dental, because they really need to see all of it. And then we really need to find somebody who has the right skill set to take on the rigor of that curriculum. That's all.
I wanted to do just a moment of clarification here. Both Peggy, Elgin Community College, and Danville Area Community College were part of the original 8, and they keep referring to AO, which actually is the initiative that led to ICAPS. So for those of you that are in the Transitions Academy, when they say AO, they were part of the original 8 that were in the Accelerating Opportunity Initiative, and so therefore, when it's kind of the 2 words are kind of crossing over. So just so you'll know, just for clarification. Let's go on to the next question, but I think we've already addressed this a little bit. But if you have anything to add, any of you, what does the CTE instructor bring to the table, and what does the adult education instructor bring to the table? And I think that this might be in terms of both planning as well as continual monitoring and improvement of the program. So, Andrea, do you have anything to add to what you already said about that?
Yeah, Devin does.
Oh, Devin does. Okay.
In terms of the CTE instructor, we found it's been helpful, especially in terms of the external buy-in. As Andrea was mentioning, we've been kind of running this learning community, similar, shortened model for several years now. And for us to come to meetings and describe how great this program is for our students and the college is one thing, but if you have full-time faculty and faculty from other career areas, deans describing it, the success of it, and they're excited about the program, it has more of a buy-in, outside of adult ed. And then also, in terms of the adult ed instructor, for the credit students, when they come in, they kind of are expected to know how to study, know how to read textbooks, take exams. So the adult ed instructor kind of brings that study skills, reading skills, textbook skills that students are expected to know typically coming first day in, that a career technical instructor might not be used to teaching.
Okay, great. Laura, do you have anything to add to that with the CTE instructor or the adult ed instructor in terms of planning or in implementation?
I would just like to say again, with your CTE instructors, they may not be used to dealing with adult education students, which are really the same as college students, but most of the time they don't realize that. They think it's something different. So it just has to be somebody with compassion and who has a temperament that's compatible with our students. So just keep that in mind. and then the adult education instructor, you know, they are bringing that learner's attitude, and they have to be a little humble because, again, there are going to be things they obviously don't know about the vocational piece of it. So they need to have that learner's attitude, and they need to be willing to troubleshoot and think outside the box because, again, I think they said earlier about the program evolving. It evolves practically every day at one point or another. So, you know, just the people are really key. They have to be agreeable, compassionate, and humble, in my opinion.
Okay, Peggy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just very much agree with what Laura said about being humble. I think being kind of not having an ego is critical for the adult ed faculty going in there. And also, I think that they bring student advocacy. So sometimes I think we've experienced where there's a tendency in some of the CTE programs where, I don't know, if a student is acting out or misbehaving or not performing well, I don't know, I don't want to say, it might be overstating it to say they're encouraged to drop by the faculty, but there's certainly not a history maybe or a culture of really trying to get them to stay. So that might be overstating it, but I guess I feel that the adult ed instructor does a lot to sensitize them to the needs of students, both the adult ed students and then the regular CTE students who are in the classroom too, to try to get them what they need, whether it's tutoring outside of this initiative for those who aren't in it, but kind of like they know their story and can kind of help advocate for students to be retained in the program.
Great, thank you. We're going to go on to the next question. How has each member enhanced instruction? And Laura, we'll start with you.
I would say that for the adult ed teacher, they are really, you know, they're really paying attention to what's going on in the boat class, and they're just simply breaking it down to understandable terms for the student. I'm thinking of with the CNA program, the intake with medication and how that has to be measured. That can be a little confusing for students. So the instructor, you know, they bring that adult ed piece of it to making that the math more understandable and presenting it in a way that the students can get it. So, you know, the adult ed teacher really enhances the instruction because they're the one that's looking at it, and then they're thinking, how can I make this, you know, put this in understandable terms.
Okay, and how has each member aided the other member and the students in your program, Laura?
You know what, they really do become a team and a cohort, and I think that, you know, the instructors being able to share information that they know when something's going on in the student's life, as it was Peggy was saying, advocating for the student, helping, you know, making sure if there is something going on that's a shared, if it's a shareable type of thing, that they're really talking and making sure that everyone knows what's going on. So I think that they really do develop that team attitude, and I even see it carry outside of the division. So these instructors, the adult ed and the vocational instructor, you know, they came into this as a partnership, but then I see that play out even once they leave their role. So for instance, at the college Christmas party or things like that, it's just really helped build the institution and taking the team partnership beyond just what's happening between our two programs and the specific ICAP model.
Great. Peggy, how is each member enhancing instruction?
Yeah, I guess, oh, okay. Well, same thing as Laura said. I mean, they break down the math, the vocabulary, and depending on the pathway, the needs differ. So, you know, welding, they need more in terms of measurement and whatnot. In dental, one of the skills that a lot of the students seem to be lacking are the conversational skills that aren't explicitly taught in that program, but are really, really necessary if you want to be successful as a dental office aide. So that's actually a lesson learned during the course of the program that we needed to integrate more of an oral component into our support class. We're even thinking about trying to get some tutoring outside of this going, or conversation group in our learning center, because they need even more of it, because sometimes they are getting the content, they can pass all the quizzes, but they can't work successfully as a non-native speaker in terms of some of the multitasking in terms of language and comprehension that's necessary. Also, another thing that I guess I'd mention is I think it's been useful that we often will let students who aren't in ICAPS, if a faculty on the CTE side requests it, we'll let them sit in the support class so that they can benefit. And there's been situations where that's resulted in us back enrolling somebody into the initiative if they test eligible for it, but oftentimes we just let them sit in, and it benefits them too.
Okay, and then how has each member aided the other member and the students in your program then, Peggy?
Yeah, well, it's that culture that develops, for one. I mean, the cohort culture, whether you're doing a learning community or ICAPS or what, I think that that's part of what's critical to those students moving through together and being accountable to each other. So I think one thing I would mention that maybe is a little bit different here is that we added into the model something that, a course that we're calling Thriving in the Workplace, which was one of our lessons learned over time, is that in the ICAPS support course, we spend so much time on the content that's needed in order to pass the courses and do well, that the soft skills are not as heavily, they're emphasized, but we wanted to do something that was more explicit, because our welding faculty told us that not even just ICAPS, but their regular welding students, it was something as low as like 50% of them who get a job are able to hold on to the job. And that really alarmed me to such an extent because it's all those soft skills that are lacking for students. So we built in this course that's taught by this. It's not the same teacher that teaches the support course. It is a different teacher, but she stays with them for the course of the year and teaches this in addition to the support course. It's a free adult ed course, and breaks out career modules. So I guess I want to mention that as another piece I think has really been helpful at helping students sort of bond together. And when that course is taught, students from all 4 pathways come together. So it's one course for all pathways. Kind of interesting in that way. I don't know if that's an answer, but that's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, how has each member enhanced instruction for you and also aided other members and students in your program?
I think we just have a couple things to add to what Laura and Peggy have already said. I think we're coming around to the same kind of conclusions, and one of the things that Devin wants to mention is that what the CT instructor adds to it.
Yeah, so one example, like in the last couple of weeks, we've been working on resume writing, employment skills, cover letters, interviewing with our HVAC students, and an example how the CTE faculty and our faculty work together. The CTE faculty are preparing the students for a job fair that's coming up, and basically, help them, like, what do they put on a resume for an entry-level HVAC job. And then our adult ed faculty are working on, like, how do you approach an interviewer at a job fair, what to wear at a job fair. So actually practicing, they're having the students interview each other to practice those interview skills as well. And then also, we've seen, how the CTE instructor has, kept the program, rigorous too. A lot of people, students coming into it, and I always have to tell students, like, it's not going to be any easier than if you took the, regular career technical certificate outside of ICAPS. So they keep it rigorous for the students and actually treat them like college students, which I've seen helps their self-esteem, helps them keep going, and progressing forward in their studies.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go on to the next question. And Anna Nakashima had posed this question, and she wanted to know, how do you pay for the HSEC instructor and stay within the Affordable Care Act parameters? And I'm a little confused. as to HSEC. I was thinking it might be high school equivalency something, but maybe not. It may be, I don't know who the instructor is with that. So if Anna is on here, would you clarify what that means, Anna?
Anna is not with us today.
Okay. All right. Well, then I would say, how do you pay for the I would think that it might mean the adult ed instructor and stay within the Affordable Care Act parameters, the person that's actually involved in your ICAPS program. So that would, let's leave it with that. So Peggy?
Okay. I guess the way that we do that, well, the way we do that really is that we pay, so I don't know if this is confusing, we pay them for their support course as a regular credit hour course. That's part of their load assignment. So that's a 3 credit hour class, regular teaching rate. But when they're in the CTE classroom, we pay them by a stipend that we negotiated with our faculty union. And the way we do it is, so you know, all the community college folks will know what I'm talking about. Each CTE course has credit hours and contact hours because of the lab time. So we use contact hours. And we take them and we look at all of the courses together for the semester. Let's say there were 10 contact hours of time in CTE, and we look at the 50% overlap. So we divide it in half, and we take 5 contact hours. And then we pay our teacher at half of their teaching rate for the time they spend in that CTE classroom. So they're paid at half their rate for half that time. And because it's not a teaching assignment in that regard, it's not in our payroll system as a credit hour course, and we pay on a manual form called a special pay form that's processed, and then they get paid when it's got all its little signatures on it. We do have to quantify the number of hours that it kind of equates to, allegedly to be included in Affordable Care Act calculations. But because it's a manual process, to be totally honest with you, I saw a spreadsheet recently of all the employees in the college for affordable care who were like in the danger zone. And even my more heavily working ICAPS people that I was worried about were not showing up even close to the danger zone. And I don't know if it's a timing issue in terms of when they add those hours in, or if because it's all, you know, evened out over time and averaged, it never hits the threshold that's a concern. So I guess that's my answer. I am a little worried because I said earlier I want to do 100% overlap in dental in the future if it's the first time someone's teaching it. And as you start to increase that amount of time, you do start to encroach on it. But by doing a stipend, you avoid, if your college has done a formula for teaching where they also add in like office hours and planning time, that doesn't have to be included in our calculation when we're doing it in a stipend-based way.
Thank you. Andrea, how do you pay for the HSEC instructor?
Yeah, up to this point, it's been traditional here that it's been full-time faculty involved. So it's usually been just part of their load or overload. So it hasn't been an issue. But as I move forward, I have to look at how we will work with adjunct professors. And here, I would have liked to do it how Peggy does it, but each college has, or each organization has their own formula that they've given to the IRS, I believe, of how they calculate. And the way they did it here, it's all credit hour based. I don't think I'm going to be able to do the creative, what Peggy was describing. So it's going to be a challenge, and I think it'll just be, unfortunately, an adjunct giving up something in order to do this. And haven't hit that wall yet because it's all been full time so far, but it will come. So I honestly don't have the answers yet, but we won't have. I know it will be strictly credit hour, and I know their calculations here related to ACA are related to 52-week work year, even though teachers don't work 52 weeks and that kind of thing. So I don't even know yet. So.
Okay, and Laura?
Our adult education teacher, the support-based class is paid by credit hour, and then the time that they're in the voc classes is paid hourly. And then we just make sure that they stay below, I'm thinking our threshold here at the college is below 25 hours a week, so we just make sure we don't get close to those hours.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, we're going to start with you. Have you been able to braid funding, and if so, how has this been accomplished?
Mostly when we talk about funding, we're talking about tuition for those students. So I'm going to hand it over to Devin, who has used all kinds of sources for tuition.
So in terms of tuition, we use our GD scholarships that occur after a student passes the high school equivalency exam, and that's through our foundation here at the college. And then also we have a program called the Women's Program, which is for single parents, men or women, and also women who are studying non-traditional careers. So that's how we were able to get funding for 2 of our women students in HVAC as well. So they paid for the tuition, the books, and supplies, and they aren't limited to just 1 semester as well, so they actually pay for every semester as long as they are passing the course with a peer better. And then we also use Perkins as well for books for the students who aren't receiving any other scholarship money. And then we also use Perkins as well for faculty for professional development and development of the curriculum, and to meet as well before the program and during the program starting.
Great, thank you. Laura?
Our college waives tuition for the voc classes, so it's not been as painful as some schools may be experiencing, but I think it's also important to remind people that hopefully one day they will get state apportionment money. It's kind of laughable right now, but someday that will come through, so that helps. Also, some of our classes were low enrollment, some of the vocational classes, so the teachers weren't able, a couple of them weren't going to be able to even meet their full-time load. So by us having the ICAPS program, we were able to kind of help them meet their load by adding our students. So it kind of worked out as part of their full-time contract. We've also had some funding come from nonprofits who they will help pay for a book, or they'll provide bus tickets. Some of them pay for some of the GED tests. And again, that's on an individual student's, what they qualify for through a specific nonprofit. So we just try to make sure that we're working as a part of our area planning process to utilize what everyone has and not duplicate.
Peggy?
So yeah, originally, right before ICAPS came, I'll just mention that we had started 1 year prior using American Recovery Act funding on doing a welding program using the iBest model. So that was our original funding source that then we braided with the AO grant when it came. But just in terms of like money to run the program, our most significant source outside of the AO grant or our adult ed grant was through a TACT grant. We were part of the INAM consortium, which is now done, but that was pretty significant. We used that to support AO for manufacturing, and that allowed us to hire a second full-time career navigator who worked throughout the duration of that grant, and it also provided some funding for the other career navigator. So it was a pretty significant funding source. We also use Perkins for a number of things to support the program. We do loaner textbooks for all the students. It helps support that and other things. It pays for part of the navigator, but now Perkins is also frozen this year, which is why we're running into some problems with our navigator funding. But AO had been a source, and our adult ed grant is a source. Tuition, we don't, we do a 3 credit hour waiver for tuition, but we give it to them in the second semester so that it encourages them to stick around till then. But a lot of our students are on self-pay plan and they work like the second shift or something. And in addition to this is a really heavy course load. So I don't know how they do it. We do have foundation scholarships available. There's a number of students that are on those, and then we have a number of students with WIOA support who are in the program as well. And then we have a local nonprofit, Two Rivers Head Start, that has I think it's a CSBG grant that has also funds available that can be used for tuition. So that's been a little bit helpful. Kind of just piece it all together.
Okay, thank you. Laura, I'm going to start with you on this next question because you had said you had an advanced CNA course. So how do you share space and time with all the requirements, the professional regulations, the trade standards that you're required to meet for CTE programs?
For the CNA program, it's real simple. I'm over that department, so it's like, we will do this. I think, I'm just kind of kidding about that, but everyone just works together. I think, again, when you're setting up the base for these programs, everyone just understands it has to be a college effort. It's not an adult ed effort. It's not a, a vocational effort. It's a college effort. So everyone, I mean, here we just work together. Everyone realizes that, it's the college. It's not our own personal property, and if we agree to be a part of it, we need to work together. So we've not really had any problems. Everyone says what they need, and we again are communicating with each other. Big piece. Make sure you're communicating and talking, and we try to work all of that out well before the semester ever gets there.
Andrea?
Yeah, similar to Laura, the CT instructor, the HVAC instructor we work with, it is his lab almost. I guess it's a brand new HVAC lab that he's the one that designed it, and he kind of owns the space. So having that in is key. He even got us, through his influence only could we have gotten this, a room right next to the lab that's a classroom that serves where we can have our adult ed support class. So it's having that connection, I think.
Okay, thank you. Peggy?
Yes, same thing. Our students are in seats within, as a cohort in seats in regular CTE classes with other students. So I would say, they're in the regular labs along with the regular program takes place in. But like Andrea, they have been kind enough in really all of the cases to find a space for us to do our support class that's over in that area, so that it's right nearby, and that's been really helpful.
Thank you. Andrea, I'm going to start with you. What are the success rates you have experienced with your students, and how does this compare to the success rates of the non-integrated CTE programs at your site?
That's an easy question. We have not finished a year, so we really don't have anyone having completed the full certificate. But we had some attrition. I think we started out with 9 HVAC, and we have, we're 9, and now we only have 5 remaining. So I must say that we're, fingers crossed that we can get 5 to the end, but we don't have those statistics yet.
Okay, thank you. Laura?
Okay, I apologize. I don't have my exact stats in front of me, so anecdotally, I'm going to tell you how I feel it's been going. The success rates, again, a lot of the time, it seems about 3% of the students are going to end up dropping for one reason or another. And again, that kind of does go to the adult education culture of, today it's an emergency, but we didn't plan for that. So there's usually about 30% that are going to drop. For the people that remain, most of them are successful through the end, and specifically because of the support-based help, they're able to get through those tough tests, and so they seem to do very well. As compared to regular students, if you want to put the word regular, the CNA classes, it's just about the same actually, because our college hasn't charged tuition for CNA. So, but that is changing. That's changing next semester probably once the board votes. So our students seem to do about as well as the regular CNA students. Our automotive students seem to do better than the traditional college students. They complete more, they attend more hours. The teachers have all just kind of marveled that these students are better than their traditional students, and they share that throughout the college anytime they're asked to speak about it. So the students really do much better. And I'll just stop there until we get to the follow-up.
Peggy,
Okay.
you had sent some data that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So it's on the screen. So you see a lot of bars. It's a little confusing, so I'm going to explain. But this is about the percentage of the students who earn their certificates within the first year of the program. And you see at the bottom, those are the 4 different cohort areas, the 4 pathways: CNC, dental, HVAC, and welding. And then kind of like each little clump represents a cohort. So like 2012 spring are the students who started in the spring of that year, and then we started another group the following semester. So the purple bars represent students that are in ICAPS, and then the yellow bars represent a comparison group that are the traditional CTE students. And we used I think it's important that when we did this, we worked with our institutional research department and let them lead the way in determining who's going to comprise the comparison group, because it's not that easy to figure out. The comparison group students did not have to enroll in all of the classes that the ICAPS students did, because in many cases those students, you would have no comparison group because there are not a lot of students that go that intensely, which is a problem to start with. But so if you look across the way, you see how the purple is higher than the yellow. The purple is good. The purple is ICAPS, and the completion rates are much, much higher. And in the last 2 cohorts, we had actually 100% completion rates from students who enrolled in the initiative in CNC and dental and welding. So the numbers of students enrolling are not enormous. And I think one of the reasons that the completion rate has become so high is in part because we've gotten much better at our initial screening and who we're accepting in. So I'm not saying we're creaming, because we're not, but we're really trying to make sure students fully understand the rigor, the time, the year-long commitment, and they kind of sign their life away that they're going to stick with it for that year. And then the career navigator, also is a key to that success. I'm a little worried right now about how it'll impact completion as we lose that position.
Thank you for sharing your data. I'd like to start, Laura, with how do you follow up with successful students when they leave your program?
We do not have a formal follow-up. We contact them to find out if they're working, if they're still working, that type, but mostly we try to keep in contact with them because we use them in a lot of reports, trying to find out where they're at. For example, we had 2 students finish the program, and one CNA, one automotive, and they were featured in our Vermilion Advantage newsletter, which is a monthly publication that goes out through our economic development team, and trying to get both businesses to realize the value in supporting these types of programs, and also the community in, if a student has dropped out of high school, what alternative is there. So we like to keep in contact with them as far as being able to use them for publications. We did do a 6-month follow-up to find out if they were working, where they were working, and then we also tried to compare some data with the local unemployment office to find out where students are, because sometimes it can be kind of difficult to follow where they are at. With the businesses, especially with the nursing homes where these CNA students were employed, they provide us information on if that student's still working.
Evan, Andrea and Evan, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, Devin has been a transitions coordinator here way before ICAPS even came to existence just because of the learning community kind of in the bridges that the college has been doing. So I'll have Devin.
Yeah, I would say for me, especially when our students pass their high school equivalency and transition to college, just keeping in touch with them. For me, a helpful tool, which sounds strange, has been Facebook. So keeping in touch with students that way. And then students I find will come back. Even like I just had a student that came back who's about to transition to university. And then getting them involved as well. So like having them talk to high school equivalency classes or in our info sessions to new students. Because then like it shows that the students can do it, and it looks good for our program as well to have former students coming back. And we also invite them to our graduation, our high school equivalency graduation, all our alumni as well.
Thank you. Peggy, do you have anything to add to that before we go on to the next question?
Just real briefly to say that, it is really important to try to keep in touch with the students and kind of build that in from the get-go, saying that you're going to do that and that you want to hear about changes in their life and whatnot. I think part of the joy of being part of the original 8 was that we had the pleasure of responding to numerous lengthy surveys and such from Jobs for the Future. So we really needed to have a handle at that point on what was happening to the students, but it is getting a little unwieldy to keep up with at this point, figuring out where they've all gone and what's happening. But you want to be able to tell your story, and the only way to do that is by sharing the impact. And whenever I present or anything on this initiative, somebody always asks, well, how many of them got jobs? Somebody, especially when they're not from adult ed, they want to know how many of them are working. So that's a hard one to answer, but it's important to be able to answer. So I would say build that in as a function of the Career Navigator if you can, that kind of follow-up.
Okay, and Peggy, I'll let you go ahead and what advice do you have for these new ICAPS programs?
Well, I think one of the things to know is that enrollment is really difficult. I think I hear that from most of the programs, especially if you don't have it tuition free. And even in cases where programs do, I've heard sometimes that that's a problem. Laura might be able to speak to that. But for us, enrollment has been difficult because it's hard to find students who can afford the program and be working, et cetera. And so to get our numbers large enough, there's some logistical challenges when you're working with your career tech areas about setting aside certain numbers of seats for reserving them for ICAPS students. But you have to be able to predict how many you're really going to be able to get, right? And then identifying like a date when you're going to release those seats so that they can fill them with other students if you can't. Those kinds of things are things you want to think about. And then the sustainability is really difficult right now, especially where no one has any money. But you want to think of it from the get-go. And I know, even the startup programs weren't to get a big windfall of money or anything. So I'm sure that you are thinking of how you're going to sustain it as you develop, because you want it to be a long-lasting plan, not something that you're just doing for a year.
Thank you. Laura?
I would say, number one, involve all stakeholders from the beginning, and I've kind of hit on that throughout my conversations. If you don't have everyone at the table, you will run again into some resistance. So if you have everyone at the table, when you're forming these ideas, it's going to be better to push them through. Also try to do a mental walkthrough to identify possible problems and troubleshoot them before something happens. Try to fill a real need in your community. Really look at I know you have to provide some labor market data and look at that, but really try to find out, what is a need, because if it's really a need in your community, then it's going to be easier to get community support if you need it. Also, I want to say it takes time, so don't get discouraged. Don't think you're going to come out of the gate with a finished product. We all said ours is constantly evolving, and you have to be flexible to let it evolve. It's not going to look the same as when you started, and that's okay. That's a good thing because it's a learning process. And then finally, just to let everybody know that when we started what was Accelerating Opportunities, now ICAPS, at the time it wasn't, I don't think it was as critical as it is now. And now that WIOA has hit, you know, I'm thinking how thankful I was that we were involved from the beginning, because we're prepared to move forward with ICAPS-like models with and I see how we can easily fit into that WIOA process. So, you know, it may hurt, but like my mom used to say, it's going to hurt, but in the long run, you're going to be better for it. So it really is a good thing to be involved with, and I'm really happy that we were able to do that.
Okay, thank you. Andrea, do you have anything to add? Any advice?
Yes, just to build off what Laura said about the needs of the community. We had a couple ideas where we were going to do a full-blown 16 credit hour office manager program that it was, in the meantime, we couldn't do it because it wasn't approved by the curriculum committee, et cetera, but it ended up that what we produced, we can't officially call ICAPS, but it's an 8 credit hour office assistant certificate that's not ICAPS, but yet the students are getting great jobs, and we'll continue to do this no matter what. So meeting the needs of the community is very important. So just to remind everyone that those things might happen in your particular area, and also not to be discouraged. Obviously, I mentioned this before, that our idea was to go into logistics, supply chain management from the beginning, but then a full-time faculty that they had hired to start this program here at Harper declined the offer, et cetera, and just because of that didn't happen. But I think eventually, we're hoping for this next fall, something like that will happen, and there's just things that are out of your control, so don't lose sight of the end. If you know, in fact, it's going to meet the sustainable wage that our students will need later on, and things that are beyond your control will happen at these large institutions. So I wouldn't, and with WIOA, as Laura said, no matter what, we're institution-wise, everybody knows about WIOA, so we're all going toward career pathways anyway, so it will eventually come together.
Okay, thank you. We have time for a couple of additional questions from the field. So if you have any questions at all, please raise your hand. But while we're waiting for you to raise your hand, I'd like to ask Ben or Josh if either of you have any comments that you'd like to make regarding what's been said here today. Josh, I'll go with you first.
Okay, good morning. I just want to say this has been fantastic. The information that's been presented has been phenomenal. And 2 to 3 new programs, I know that this is a difficult time. I visited Triton, but Morton and Logan, we had to postpone our visits. I'm hoping to get those set back up again once we get a budget, of course that being our biggest stumbling block at the moment. But I'm here if you have any questions, anything I can do to help, just please feel free to give me a call or email me, and I'm here.
Ben, do you have anything to add while we're waiting for questions?
Sure, yes, just a couple of points to relay. In DAISY, we will see the change on the student flag in the student status section from AO student to ICAPS student. Once the update is completed, I'll go ahead and email out notifications that has been accomplished. Just a reminder that the Add Non-Adult Education course is there for the credit courses for tracking those purposes, and the soft skills support classes traditionally are entered into DAISY at level the same as other ASE coursework for tracking purposes. And the only specific items that I heard that I kind of made a quick note about following some of the feedback about how success rates, if there's any DAISY queries that can be either custom reports that can be produced, please reach out for me. Otherwise, you can search for student records in the advanced student search section where you flag the highlight the AO student, like I said, ICAPS in the future, and search through that portal to be able to get more information on your AO student or your ICAPS students. So, Thank you. That'd be all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Since we don't have any additional questions, it sounds like our panelists did an excellent job of sharing their knowledge and experiences with you today. We would like to let you know that if you do have some additional questions when this is all over with, you could email either Sarah or Amy or myself with those questions. But we would like to thank our panelists, Peggy Heinrich from Elgin Community College, Laura Williams from Danville Area Community College, and Andrea Fiebig and Devin Chambers from William Rainey Harper, as well as thank Josh and Ben for their time today as well. We have calls set up with each of the 3 ICAPS programs in the Transitions Academy for the last week of November 30th and December 1st. So we're looking forward to discussing with you guys where you are in your process at that point in time. So this webinar again was brought to you by the Illinois Transitions Academy in coordinated partnership between the Southern Illinois Professional Development Center and the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. Thank you all for attending today. We appreciate your time. We hope it was informative for you. Thank you all.